And I wanted to talk about something that I listened to this week in regards to arcade games and how they were developed back in the day and the similarities there are to mobile. So my pick of the week this week is going to be a little bit early in the wrap-up today because I want you to go out and listen to this great interview on the Retronauts with a guy named Mark Turmel, who was a developer on NBA Jam and a number of other games. In fact, he was an Apple II developer. I used to play his games as a little kid. I didn't even know it until I listened to his interview. He used to do stuff for Sirius Software, and one of his games was called Sneakers, which was one of my favorites. And he was talking about how they were designing NBA Jam to basically consume as many quarters as possible and some of the tweaks that they made to the game to make all that happen. So if you've never played NBA Jam before, it's an awesome arcade game. They have some great ports on most of the major consoles from the 90s, and it's a 2-on-2 basketball game that has a lot of fun animation to it, really cool dunks and everything. I just love this game. We used to play it a lot in college. And he was talking about the analytics that they built into the game back in 1991 to help them develop a game that could consume more quarters, but also help the operators to determine what settings they should set the game to get as much money out of them as possible. And one of the things that Mark Turmel was talking about in the interview was how they were looking at all these game audits that they were collecting when the game was still kind of being trialed at a few arcades as they were completing development on it. And you can see some of the analytics you get out of this machine. How many games were started? How many individual players started? How many people put their initials in versus not? How many people finished the first, second, or third, or fourth quarter? How many went to overtime? All this data, and they were able to figure some things out from watching how people played to determine what would get them to pay more money when the game was finally released. And one of the things he was talking about was some adjustments they made to the game to make the score closer, because they found that if the score was too lopsided, either you were losing by a lot or winning by a lot, people were walking away from the game. And the way they engineered the game was that to play through it, you had to put tokens in after every quarter of the game. So people were maybe dropping out after the third quarter if they were too far ahead or too far behind. And they added this feature specifically to address this problem called computer assistance, which keeps the game close. And they probably tweaked some of the likelihoods of a basket getting scored, for example, by the winning team, and maybe increasing the likelihood of a basket by the losing team. And maybe the computer players got a little bit better, and it would always keep the score very close to increase excitement, as they say, and higher earnings from the tests that they ran on this feature before the game was fully released. Because remember, for an arcade operator, you have limited square footage and you have to pay a lot of money to either rent or buy these arcade cabinets. So if you could guarantee them that they'll make more money, you'll certainly maybe be more inclined to invest in an NBA Jam cabinet. So they were very focused on the addictiveness of the game and the emotions that people might experience while playing the game in an effort to get more quarters out of their pocket. And this was just built right into it, right in the 90s, because they had the ability to start looking at these analytics. Now, what's interesting is Mark Turmel, the guy that was the lead developer on this project, who was interviewed in that podcast interview, now works for Zynga, the mobile developer. And he was very upfront and honest about how he took a lot of what he learned trying to make games addictive in the video arcade over to the mobile app side. And he says he spends a lot of his time now developing mobile games that women like to play and trying to figure out ways to get them to stay in the game and buy additional play time. So this is probably nothing new, but it certainly had its inspiration in the arcade era, and NBA Jam was a great example of how they put all this together. And incidentally, I just happened to listen to this interview last week, right after we were done talking about the Lemmings game here. It's kind of funny how things always coalesce around what's on your mind, the power of suggestion, if you will. But I thought this interview was very interesting, and you should definitely check it out.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Chris Allegretta, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Tom Albrecht, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/s.